When someone betrays you, it can feel like they've stabbed you in the back. But for South African ruler Shaka Zulu, that was literally true. In this episode of Inside the Betrayal, find out how Shaka's own half-sister orchestrated his assassination. Greetings everyone, it's me. Number 4, Mkobalana. Born around 1787, Mkobalana grew up in a small village in what is now South Africa. His mother, Nandi, was a young widow who had previously been married to a powerful chief. When Mkobalana was born, his father, Senzangakona, didn't even know that he existed. The boy grew up believing that his dad was actually his uncle. That's because Senzangakona had a twin brother named Jama who had taken the boy in after hearing rumors that he might be his nephew. Mkobalana would later change his name to Shaka Zulu and become the most feared warrior in South Africa. He built up the Zulu Kingdom, uniting many tribes under his banner and instituting sweeping reforms. But he had a nasty habit of killing people. Real or imagined, enemies and anyone who betrayed him had a really bad end. Before we get into the juicy betrayal part, let's take a quick look at some of the reasons why people wanted him dead. For starters, there were the Dingiswayo people. After Shaka came to power, he began conquering neighboring territories, absorbing them into the Zulu Kingdom. But when he turned his sights on the Dingiswayo, they fought back. And although Shaka's warriors defeated theirs, it wasn't exactly a walk in the park. The Dingiswayo used guerrilla tactics and were able to escape with their lives by blending in with the civilian population. Since civilians were off limits to the Zulu army, Shaka had to pull back. You can imagine his frustration when he couldn't wipe out his enemy, so he decided to blame someone. And since the Dingiswayo were known to use poison, Shaka blamed them for a series of mysterious deaths in his royal court, including that of his own father. Now, whether or not the Dingiswayo were behind these deaths doesn't really matter. What matters is that Shaka thought they were, and in his mind, that made them a legitimate target. He continued to harass them, and eventually they called in backup. Shaka found himself facing an army twice the size of his own, and he knew that if he didn't do something drastic, his reign would end right there. So what did he do? He ordered a retreat. Yes, the man who had been known for his fierce attacks was running away. And if that wasn't humiliating enough, his army was being led by a rival chief that he had just betrayed and almost killed. To make matters worse, Shaka's half-sister, whom he had also sired, was among those leading the charge against him. Now, remember that this half-sister, whom we'll call Intombi for simplicity's sake, had grown up thinking that her father was the chief that he actually wasn't. She believed her dad was the great warrior Shaka Zulu. So when Shaka ordered the retreat, she saw an opportunity to capture him and kill him herself. She rode up to him and demanded that he surrender so that she could take him back to her father's village and decide his fate. She probably thought that her dad would be overjoyed to see his long-lost son, but she might have been wrong. When Shaka refused to surrender, Ntomb's men opened fire on him. Shaka was hit multiple times, but he managed to keep riding until he fell off his horse. Then Ntomb's men hacked him to death with their spears and assegais. Afterwards, they cut off his head and threw it into a nearby river. They tried to sink his body too, but it wouldn't go down. According to legend, they finally managed to weigh it down by putting red-hot stones in his mouth and nostrils. Later, they took his head to the chief who had led the army against Shaka, who was presumably Ntombi's father. But he refused to accept Shaka's surrender without his army's permission. So instead, Ntombi's group paraded Shaka's head around the village, showing it to everyone, basically rubbing it in their faces that they had killed the mighty Shaka Zulu. Why did Ntombi want Shaka dead? Well, aside from the fact that she had probably heard about all the horrible things he'd done, including killing her mother, she might have been influenced by the other women in her life. Her aunt, Makokela, had been one of Shaka's wives, but he had taken another wife, which demoted her to secondary wife status. Not only that, but he had taken a young girl named Iyeza, whom Makokela had raised, and made her his favorite wife. If Shaka hadn't been such a hotshot warrior and king, Makokela and Iyeza might have ended up getting along famously. But Shaka seemed to be totally oblivious to the simmering resentment around him. To him, it was all love and light. Unfortunately, though, the honeymoon period didn't last forever. Eventually, Iyeza got tired of Shaka and left him for one of his generals. This infuriated Shaka, who punished Izetha by cutting off her nose and lips, and then to rub salt in the wound, he forced her to watch as he paraded her around the kingdom. Yeah, Shaka was a brute, but he probably didn't realize how many enemies he had until it was too late. Click here to watch another video about a famous murder. Or click here to watch this video instead. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. See you next time.